At 4:36 in the morning, when the terminal window still held more reflection than sky, Melora Bix came through the glass doors of the Caraway Regional Airport Police Office with a uniform scarf folded across both palms. She was wearing navy heels, a navy skirt, and the small silver wings of blue Harrier air over her left breast. The scarf in her hands was the brighter blue issued to junior cabin crew, the kind meant to look cheerful beneath fluorescent lights and patient smiles. It was damp at one corner, as if it had been carried through the thin, freezing mist that moved across the employee parking lot and gathered under the canopies where hotel shuttles idled. Melora did not burst in. She did not scream. She stood at the counter with her shoulders squared and her face pale. And when Officer Quinn Daster asked whether she needed help, she said in a low voice that seemed to be holding itself together by force, "One of my attendants is missing from Layover. Her wake-up call went unanswered. Her bed was not slept in. Her name is Eden Rill." There were airport police reports that began with intoxicated passengers, abandoned bags, fights at gates, lost children, and frightened people who had missed the last flight home. This one began with a senior flight attendant placing a scarf on a laminate counter like evidence from a life she still expected to save. Melora gave the time of the previous night's arrival, the pairing number, the hotel van number, the room floor, the diner where the crew had eaten, and the exact minute Eden had supposedly stepped away from the group. She said Eden was 26, newly hired, nervous on her first month of reserve, proud enough not to admit she was overwhelmed. Blue Harrier Flight 486 had come in from Blackwater City, late because of mechanical paperwork. The crew had gone to the Thistle Crown, a low airport hotel beyond the rental lots. Around 10:15 p.m., Melora said, Eden received a call that upset her. Around 10:28, Eden left the lobby to get fresh air and maybe walked to the all-night pharmacy across the frontage road. By midnight, she had not answered texts. By 3:20 a.m., the crew wake-up system called the rooms for the morning departure, and Eden's room rang into emptiness. Melora had used a manager's key with the hotel clerk beside her. Eden's suitcase stood by the desk. Her lipstick, pressed powder, folded sleep shirt, and paper crew itinerary were inside. Her uniform blouse hung from the bathroom hook. The blue scarf was under the sink, wet at one end. Melora's eyes filled only when she described finding the scarf. The detail that made the first story powerful was not fear. It was usefulness. Melora knew where the crews parked, how long it took to walk from the hotel to the pharmacy, which cameras had blind spots because of the hotel's old porte cochere, which ramp employees had access to the service tunnel, which crew members had gone to their rooms first, and why Eden might not have wanted to make trouble. She told Officer Daster that Eden had been anxious all evening because she had seen a man she knew from before training. The man's name was Jasper Noe, a contract shuttle mechanic who drove personal fares for airport workers after his shift. Jasper had dated Eden briefly in her hometown, or wanted to, depending on which version of gossip arrived first. Melora said Jasper had followed the crew van in a gray sedan, then appeared near the hotel ice machine while Eden was filling a bucket. Eden had laughed it off in front of the others. But later, she had shown Melora a message on her phone. "You still owe me a talk." Melora remembered the words because she had repeated them into the air, trying to decide whether a grown woman could be told not to go outside. By sunrise, the case had already been shaped. Caraway was not a large airport. Its runways lay flat among harvested fields, freight warehouses, a frozen retention pond, and narrow two-lane roads bordered by winter reeds. In the dark, it seemed much larger than it was because the lights ran for miles, blue along the taxiways and orange over the loading yards, giving empty land the look of a city that belonged to no one. Searchers moved outward from the hotel in ugly, practical arcs. They checked the pharmacy, the ditch beside West Turn Road, the fenced rental overflow, the employee smoking shelters, the narrow grass between the frontage road and the freight spur. A dog tracked weakly toward the service road behind the catering kitchen, and then lost the scent where de-icing trucks had left sour chemical puddles. The hotel cameras showed Eden, or seemed to show her, crossing the lobby in her coat with a small black crew tote on her shoulder. The image was grainy and half blocked by the reflective glass of the gift shop. A woman in dark airline clothes, hair pinned up, moved past a plant and disappeared into the vestibule. She did not look back. Detective Leo Markham from the County Major Crimes Unit was called in before noon because the airport chief did not like the silence around the missing phone. Detective Sabella Wynn arrived 2 hours later from the State Aviation Bureau, not because every missing flight attendant required a state investigator, but because Blue Harrier was federally regulated, partially bankrupt, and famous for losing paperwork. They interviewed Melora in a small room used mostly for unruly passengers. She sat with both hands wrapped around a paper cup and answered in complete sentences. She said she had taken Eden under her wing during training. She said the younger woman wanted to be perfect, wanted to send money to her mother, wanted to make the job look effortless. Eden had been quiet at dinner, picking at fries. She had asked whether Caraway was safe for walking. Melora said she had told her to stay inside, but Eden had smiled, touched the silver trainee wings on her jacket, and said she needed 5 minutes away from fluorescent light. When Leo asked why Melora did not go with her, Melora closed her eyes. "Because I thought 5 minutes meant 5 minutes," she said. It was the sort of answer that sounded less rehearsed because it accused itself. Eden Rill's mother reached Caraway that afternoon in a green county coat with 3 buttons missing. Greta Rill had driven 6 hours from the town of Cranley, where she worked days at a veterinary supply desk and evenings at a laundromat after the grocery closed. She had never flown until the police booked her a ticket home a week later. In the first hours, she walked through the hotel room with her fingertips barely touching anything. She stood before the bathroom hook where Eden's blouse hung and said the garment looked too stiff, as if it were pretending to know the shape of her daughter. She told detectives Eden had wanted to fly since childhood, not with glamorous dreams, but with a stubborn belief that a uniform could move a person out of whatever town had named her. Eden had practiced safety announcements in the kitchen. She had learned to roll her hair into a smooth bun from online videos. She had bought blister pads for her heels and mailed her mother a photograph of herself in navy blue, grinning beside a hotel mirror. "She said she made it," Greta whispered. "She said I could stop worrying about the application fee because it had finally led somewhere." There were things in the early file that seemed to support Melora's account. The hotel desk clerk remembered the new girl because she asked whether crew members were charged for bottled water. The diner waitress remembered a young attendant who laughed when a pilot complained about scrambled eggs. One exhausted first officer remembered Melora scolding someone gently for leaving her scarf on the back of a chair. Jasper No's gray sedan had passed a traffic camera at 10:44 p.m., less than half a mile from the Thistle Crown. Jasper admitted knowing Eden, admitted texting her, admitted being at the hotel because he sometimes picked up fares from crew members who did not want to wait for the hotel van. He was broad-shouldered, impatient, and foolish enough to delete messages after hearing police were looking for him. When Leo Markham asked why, Jasper pressed the heels of his hands into his eyes and said he was scared because everyone always believed the person with the badge, the uniform, or the better story. That answer did not help him. For weeks, Jasper was the outline people colored in. News vans parked beyond the terminal approach and filmed the Thistle Crown sign through frost. Online forums printed his name before police did. Someone broke a window at the garage where he rented a work bay. He had no clean alibi between 10:52 p.m. and 12:10 a.m. He had scratches on his wrist from a stripped alternator. He had once called Eden ungrateful in front of a bartender. Most damaging of all, a hotel guest claimed he saw a man like Jasper standing near the rear stairwell around 11, one hand inside his coat, his head turned toward a woman in a dark uniform. The guest was 73, jet-lagged, and honest about his poor eyesight. But the town had already decided that an uncertain witness could become certain if enough grief needed him to be. Melora helped the search in ways that made suspicion feel cruel. She stood beside Greta in a conference room at the airport Hilton Annex while volunteers signed maps. She corrected reporters who called Eden a stewardess. She gave investigators a list of every crew member who had flown with Eden during her supposed reserve month. She cried once on television, silently, when asked what she would say to Eden if Eden could hear her. "Your jump seat is waiting," she answered, and the phrase printed across cardboard wings taped to the terminal window. Blue Harrier held a small safety stand down. Cabin crews pinned blue ribbon around their handles. For travelers, Eden's disappearance became one more airport tragedy, condensed into a photograph near baggage claim. A smiling woman, in a uniform, she had not yet had time to make ordinary. The problem was that no one outside Melora's circle seemed to know Eden well as a flight attendant. Blue Harrier explained that she was reserve, that junior attendants moved through bases with little stability, that a bankruptcy restructuring had scattered training classes across 3 states, that employee numbers lagged behind names because the payroll vendor and scheduling vendor did not speak the same language. It was absurd, but it was a familiar kind of absurd. Anyone who had worked around a collapsing regional airline knew paper could be late, passwords could fail, and entire human beings could seem to exist only on a hotel folio, a lanyard, and an exhausted supervisor's memory. Sabella Wynn requested Eden's personnel file twice. The first answer was that it was in transition. The second answer was that the legal department would gather it. By the time the third request was drafted with sharper wording, detectives were occupied with Jasper's phone, tower dumps, ditch searches, and the discovery of Eden's black crew tote beside a chain-link fence near the old employee bus loop. The tote made the case feel worse and simpler. A maintenance worker found it in brittle grass at dawn 16 days after Eden vanished. Inside were mints, a half-used notebook, a comb, a sealed pair of pantyhose, 3 printed safety cards, a key tag from the Thistle Crown, and a crumpled receipt from the all-night pharmacy for throat lozenges and travel tissues. Eden's phone was not inside. Neither was her wallet. The notebook held only ordinary fragments, such as gate numbers, a reminder to buy shoe polish, and a list of cities she hoped to see. On the second-to-last page, someone had written, "Jay, keep showing up," then scratched it out with so many lines the paper buckled. Jasper said he had never seen the notebook. Melora said she had. She remembered Eden closing it quickly during dinner. She remembered thinking the younger woman was embarrassed by fear. The fence beyond the bus loop became another place searchers returned to without finding anything larger than weeds and wind-lifted trash. By the end of the second month, the investigation had separated into 2 stories. The public story was clean enough to retell: a young flight attendant on layover, a former admirer with anger, a walk into a cold airport night, a missing phone, a bag found by a fence. The private file was more irritating. Eden's phone last communicated with a tower that covered almost the whole airport industrial district, including the hotel, freight kitchens, reserve crew lounge, 2 employee lots, the old training center, and a road that led nowhere except a defunct skydiving school. Jasper's sedan, though recorded near the hotel, was recorded again at his garage too soon to give him time for everything people imagined. The pharmacy receipt had no clear camera match because the register camera had been pointed at the ceiling after a holiday decoration pulled its wire loose. The woman in uniform leaving the lobby might have been Eden, but the footage could not show her face. Melora's account never contradicted itself. It had the unnerving strength of a story, repeated with care, before anyone knew which details mattered. Spring came to Caraway with thawing ditches, brown fields, and airline layoffs. Blue Harrier closed 2 routes, and moved crews through borrowed gates. Eden's poster faded from the baggage claim column until one corner lifted and fluttered whenever the automatic doors opened. Greta Rill came back every few weeks, sometimes alone, sometimes with a cousin who spoke too loudly because quiet made the airport unbearable. She stood by the volunteer board and read the tips, most of which were useless. A woman in a blue coat seen at a truck stop, a scarf found near a drainage culvert, a man bragging in a bar, a dream someone's aunt had about a hangar. Leo Markham kept Jasper on the board because no one had taken him off with evidence. But he began writing questions in the margins around Melora's name. Not accusations. Questions. How had Melora gotten the hotel key so fast? Why was she sure Eden walked toward the pharmacy before the receipt had been found? Why had she described the wet end of the scarf as rainwater when the mist that night had been dry enough that officers' notebooks never softened? At 5 months, a bankruptcy judge approved the sale of Blue Harrier's remaining assets to North Star Plains Air. At 7 months, the crew base at Caraway began emptying file cabinets. At 8 months, in a records room with no windows and a floor polished by decades of rolling chairs, Ari Tolland opened a gray archival box labeled with 3 years of irregular operations packets and found the first piece of truth anyone could hold. Ari was not an investigator. She was a crew records analyst with a stiff left knee, a habit of sharpening pencils with a pocket knife, and a dislike for comforting explanations. Her job during the merger was to reconcile every active cabin employee against training, medical, payroll, and pairing records before seniority lists moved to the acquiring airline. A missing employee could not simply remain missing in a labor transfer. Eden Rill had to be coded, deceased, missing, resigned, furloughed, or never active. Ari entered her name. Nothing came back. She tried Rill, Eden. Nothing. She tried Eden Marie Rill because that was the name on the missing poster. Nothing. She searched by employee number printed on the hotel folio. 734418. That number belonged to a retired galley equipment inventory category, not a person. She searched the training roster from the class Melora had named. Eden's name was absent. She checked drug test clearance, uniform issue, emergency evacuation certification, cabin jump seat authorization, payroll deposits, tax forms, and base induction. The system returned nothing so consistently that the nothing became an answer. Ari did not call the newspaper. She called the county tip line and left a message so dry that the clerk almost missed its importance. Regarding Eden Rill, Blue Harrier has no employment record for her. No active, inactive, pending, withdrawn, or archived status. She was never hired. The words sounded clerical. They struck the case like a dropped metal tray. Sabella Wynn drove to the records room the next morning and sat with Ari beneath buzzing lights while they opened boxes that smelled of toner, dust, and coffee. Crew records did not only name who flew, they named who had been trained to open a door under pressure, who carried jump seat authority, who could occupy a crew hotel room, who received per diem, who signed for manuals, who was fitted for a uniform, and who was legally counted in the minimum cabin complement. Eden Rill appeared in none of those categories. Her name existed only in documents created after the layover began. A hotel rooming list, faxed from a crew printer, a hand-corrected shuttle manifest, and a copy of an irregular operations sheet that Melora had given the airport police before Blue Harrier's records department ever produced one. The reopened case did not begin with an arrest. It began with embarrassment. Detectives had to admit that for 8 months they had searched for a missing flight attendant without proving she had ever been a flight attendant. That did not mean Eden had not disappeared. It meant the uniform had been part of the crime or part of the trap. Greta Rill listened to Sabella explain it at a courthouse table and did not speak for almost a minute. Then she reached into her purse and took out a folded letter Eden had mailed her 10 days before the disappearance. Greta had kept it because the handwriting felt like a visit. Inside was a photograph of Eden wearing a blue Harrier uniform, but on the back, Eden had written, "Trial trip." Melora says not to post until HR catches up. At the time, Greta had thought it meant Eden was being careful. Now the words looked like a door opening into another room. Greta also produced a receipt from a money order made payable to Flight Path Placement Services. The amount was $2,800. Eden had called it the last fee before final assignment. Blue Harrier had never heard of Flight Path Placement Services. Flight Path was not an office. It was a mailbox rented inside a tax preparation storefront beside a nail salon 40 miles south of Caraway. The contract form promised coaching, expedited uniform access, interview preparation, and provisional observation placement with cabin mentor. Its logo was a wing drawn so badly it looked like a bent leaf. Melora Bix had signed none of the documents under her own name. The forms used the name M. Bellin, with an address that led to a vacant duplex and a phone that traced to prepaid devices purchased in airport convenience stores. But the emails were written in the same clipped, reassuring style Melora used with police. "Do not worry about the delay. Reserve hiring is messy. Bring black shoes, nude hosiery, simple makeup. Trust your mentor at the gate. Do not discuss provisional status with hotel staff. They misunderstand airline procedure." Eden had paid in installments for 7 months, so had at least 9 other women and 2 men who had wanted aviation badly enough to believe secrecy could be a hallway to belonging. The first former applicant Leo found was Kit Hollander, who worked at a bakery in Winslow and still had her navy scarf folded in tissue. Kit had not disappeared. She had completed one shadow layover with Melora 6 weeks before Eden, flying as a non-revenue companion under a guest pass, dressing in uniform once they left the airport, and being told to observe crew language at the hotel. She had been thrilled for 3 hours and humiliated for 3 months. When she asked why her official offer never arrived, Melora told her she had failed a background timing requirement and should not fight it because airlines shared notes. Kit had paid $40. Another applicant, Keir Bellis, had unloaded tires for a living after his mother mortgaged a car to pay his fee. He remembered Eden from an online preparation group. Eden had posted, then deleted, a warning that somebody was selling fake doors into the industry. The deletion happened 2 days before she vanished. She said she was going to make the woman say it out loud, Keir told detectives. She said paper was the only thing that scared professional liars. That sentence changed the search warrant. Detectives seized Melora's apartment, car, storage unit, and crew locker at Caraway. The apartment was too clean in places that did not matter, and too messy where a person actually lived. Her kitchen drawer held hotel pens from 27 cities. A closet held spare scarves, trainee wing pins, 2 outdated Blue Harrier blazer jackets, and black rolling luggage tags with names cut away. In a locked file box behind winter boots, investigators found copies of applicant identification, money order stubs, printed interview scripts, and letters warning people not to contact airline HR directly. Melora had built an imitation airline inside the shadow of a real one. It worked because real hiring was confusing, and because shame kept victims quiet. Applicants who suspected they had been fooled blamed themselves first. They had wanted too much. They had believed a stranger. They had put on a uniform before it belonged to them. Still, fraud did not prove what happened on the layover. Melora's lawyer, hired by the flight attendants union before the union understood the direction of the case, argued that even if Melora had operated an improper coaching business, Eden could still have been harmed by Jasper Noe. The first investigation had given Jasper a shape that could not be erased by apology. He remained angry in interviews. He remained unlucky in camera coverage. He had texted Eden. He had been near the hotel. He had deleted messages. When detectives returned to him, he looked older than 8 months should have made him. He placed a cigarette in his mouth, did not light it, and told them he had seen Eden after the lobby footage, but not alone. He had seen her walking with Melora along the frontage road toward the employee skywalk that crossed into the airport service side. He had not said so earlier because he thought they were real crew and that Melora would deny it, and because he had owed parking fines, and because fear makes small lies that later look like large guilt. This time, he gave a detail he had never offered. Eden had not been wearing her blue scarf. It was wrapped around Melora's left wrist, bright against the dark sleeve, as if Melora were carrying it for her. The employee skywalk had always been outside the public search zone. It connected the hotel district to a secured service corridor used by catering workers, deadheading crew with escort privileges, and maintenance staff moving between lots in bad weather. The cameras had been overwritten after 30 days. The access logs, however, had been preserved because an airport badge audit began the week after Eden vanished and froze the database. At 10:51 p.m., Melora's badge opened the west skywalk door. At 10:52, it opened the second door into the service corridor. At 11:09, it opened the small crew print room near gate C4. At 11:16, it opened the old East Ramp training annex, a low brick building behind the cargo refrigerators, where Blue Harrier had once run evacuation drills before leasing newer simulators elsewhere. Melora had told police she returned directly to the hotel after looking for Eden in the parking lot. When confronted with the badge log, she said she had forgotten a manual in the print room and gone to retrieve it. She said Eden was not with her. She said airport buildings felt different after midnight, and it was possible a frightened mind blurred separate moments together. The East Ramp Training Annex was an unloved structure, built when air travel still imagined itself in shades of brown carpet and orange plastic. By the time Eden disappeared, only 3 rooms were active: a classroom used for recurrent slide lectures, a break area with a dead vending machine, and a storage bay for obsolete cabin equipment. The rest was chained or ignored. There was a mock fuselage without wings, a row of retired aircraft seats, a smoke trainer that no longer produced smoke, old oxygen masks yellowing in plastic cups, demonstration life vests brittle at the creases, and a half-cabin door mounted in a frame so trainees could learn the weight of emergency. Search teams had checked the outside of the building during the first week because dogs moved faintly toward the cargo side. They had not entered with a warrant because no one had placed Eden inside, and airport staff said the annex was secure. Now the word secure sounded different. The first search of the annex found dust, mouse droppings, broken binders, and disappointment. Sabella watched crime scene technicians lift floor mats and remove ceiling tiles, while maintenance supervisors grumbled about asbestos records. Leo stood in the mock cabin aisle and looked at the rows of dead seats bolted to a platform. The space smelled of canvas, stale foam, and cold metal. It was not a place where a person would wander by accident. It was a place someone would bring another person by telling her she was about to learn something important. In a classroom cabinet, behind stacks of water-damaged safety manuals, they found a black makeup pouch with Eden's initials written inside in silver marker. It held a small mirror, 2 blister pads, a folded $20 bill, and a list of names: Kit Hollander, Keir Bellis, Rena Lute. Lisa. The last name had been started and crossed out. At the bottom, Eden had written, "Ask why no one has an employee number until after Fee 4. Ask why hotel lists, not HR. Ask whether badge is legal." That pouch made prosecutors confident about motive. It did not yet tell them where Eden was. The annex had been used in the months after her disappearance by maintenance contractors, bankruptcy movers, and airport interns who stored holiday decorations in one classroom. Any trace evidence had been walked over or hauled away. The mock fuselage had too many compartments: overhead bins, demonstration panels, seat bases, cabinet cavities, a galley shell with removable inserts, and a floor hatch that opened only if someone knew the old latch. The latch was found taped shut under carpet squares that matched no other flooring in the room. Inside the hatch, technicians expected manuals or wiring. They found a trainee wing pin, bent nearly flat, caught beneath a strip of insulation. It was not proof of death, but Greta Rill identified it as Eden's because Eden had scratched a tiny E onto the back with a sewing needle, an unnecessary secret mark of ownership on a thing she was not officially entitled to wear. The second search was slower. Airport engineers brought original building drawings. A retired trainer named Dovran Hale explained that the mock fuselage had once been mounted on a rolling base before someone bolted it down. A narrow service trench remained beneath the platform, accessible from behind a galley insert if 2 rusted screws were removed. In that trench, beneath foam blocks and a rolled canvas evacuation slide cover, they found Eden Rill. The report used careful language. It said human remains were recovered from a concealed equipment void inside cabin safety trainer 2. It said clothing fragments matched items visible in family photographs. It said a small bird-shaped necklace made of cheap silver-colored metal was present near the collarbone. It did not say that Greta had once bought the necklace from a gas station display because Eden liked the joke of a bird from a place selling tires and coffee. It did not say that the mother made no sound when told. It said identification was later confirmed through dental records and family DNA. Official language has always known how to stand upright when people cannot. After Eden was found, Melora stopped giving polished answers. She began giving small, useless ones. She did not know the pouch was there. She had never seen the scratched wing pin. She had entered the annex alone to retrieve training pamphlets. Eden must have followed later. Jasper must have had another badge. Someone else must have known about the service trench. Every alternative required a stranger to know exactly the same obscure facts Melora knew, and to benefit from exactly the lie Melora had told. Detectives returned to the crew records because the records had never tried to console anyone. The original cabin crew report for Flight 486 listed 3 working flight attendants: Melora Bix, Pasha Wren, and Alden Root. There was no 4th crew member. The hotel rooming list, however, listed Eden as FA4 Provisional, a code no Blue Harrier manual recognized. The print timestamp showed the list had been generated from the crew room printer at 11:12 p.m. after Melora's badge entered the airport, and while Eden was already missing from the hotel story. The shuttle manifest had Eden's name written in different ink than the rest. The paper itinerary in Eden's suitcase had a footer from Melora's home printer. The pharmacy receipt was real, but the cashier camera, once enhanced through a recovered backup from the chain's loss prevention server, showed Melora purchasing the lozenges and tissues at 10:07 p.m., before Eden supposedly left for the store. There was also the scarf. The wet corner that Melora had carried into the police office had bothered Leo from the start because it smelled faintly sweet under the airport disinfectant. Lab testing had been inconclusive in the first round, overwhelmed by handling and time. But after Eden was recovered, the scarf was re-examined against materials from the training annex. The dampness had not been weather. It contained residue from a blue cleaning solution used in the annex break area and trace dust from the mock cabin's floor trench. The scarf had been used to wipe something, then rinsed badly in the break room sink. Fibers from the same scarf were found on a rusted screw at the galley insert. Melora had carried the symbol of her own staging into the police office because she needed an object to make grief visible. She had underestimated how ordinary things travel with the rooms they have touched. The hidden business came into focus almost cruelly. Melora was not a criminal mastermind. She was a senior attendant with debts. a sick father she invoked in messages whether or not his care required money, and a talent for sounding official to people who wanted permission. She had started with coaching, how to smile in group interviews, how to answer safety questions, how to keep composure while a stranger judged your face, voice, and posture. Then she charged for preferred referrals. Then uniforms appeared, first as loaners for practice photographs, then as costumes for shadow layovers. She used guest passes, empty hotel rooms, and the confusion of a failing airline to create the illusion of employment. She learned which forms outsiders had never seen and imitated only those. She did not need to forge a whole personnel file. She needed to give each victim just enough paper to stop them from calling the real human resources number. The scam might have continued as humiliation and theft if Eden had not been the sort of person who kept lists. Eden had been rejected by Blue Harrier twice. That fact hurt Greta more than she expected, because it meant Eden's final joy had been built on withheld shame. The rejection letters were recovered from Eden's apartment under a stack of aviation magazines. On the back of one, Eden had written, "There has to be another way in." Melora had offered that way through an online forum where applicants traded advice. She praised Eden's professionalism, called her cabin ready, told her airlines lost good people to slow systems, and said Blue Harrier had provisional slots for the right candidates. Eden believed because Melora knew the language of the world Eden wanted to enter. She knew jump seat, deadhead, pairing, line check, report time, release time, crew rest. She knew how to turn vocabulary into a locked door and then offer the key for a fee. On the night of the layover, Eden was not finishing a reserve trip. She was completing Melora's staged observation. She had flown into Caraway on a companion pass under her own name, changed into uniform after arrival, eaten with the crew because Melora introduced her as a junior from another base, and checked into a hotel room assigned through a hand-corrected list. The other crew members were too tired to challenge it. Airline life taught people not to question unfamiliar faces in familiar clothes. Eden, however, had already spoken to Kit and Kier. She had printed the real HR phone number at a library. She had learned that Blue Harrier did not collect placement fees. She had found, in Melora's careless email headers, a connection between flight path and a prepaid phone used for other applicants. Her plan was not dramatic. She wanted Melora to admit the fraud in person, while Eden recorded audio on her phone. She wanted her money back. She wanted the names of others. Most of all, Greta believed, she wanted to rescue the dream from the person who had dirtied it. The recovered phone was the last major piece. It was found, not with Eden, but weeks later in a storm drain outside the east ramp after detectives used the badge timeline and old snowmelt patterns to map where someone might have thrown it from the service road. Water had ruined most of it. A forensic lab salvaged fragments from a cloud backup and one local audio file, whose end had corrupted into static. In the playable portion, Eden's voice was steady, then less steady. She asked, "How many of us paid you?" Melora answered. "Lower your voice," Eden said. "You cannot make me a crew member only when you need the hotel to believe you." Melora said the airline owed people chances, and that Eden did not understand how things worked. Eden said she understood records. She said real crew records could not be invented after a person vanished. There was movement, a hard sound against a hollow surface, and Melora saying Eden's name once in a tone that was not anger anymore. The audio did not capture the exact fatal act. It captured the lie meeting the fact that would destroy it. Prosecutors charged Melora with homicide, kidnapping, evidence tampering, fraud, and identity-related offenses. The indictment listed money amounts, fake contracts, badge misuse, and the concealment of Eden's body. But reporters returned again and again to the phrase that ordinary people understood. She was never hired. It sounded simple enough to fit in a headline, and strange enough to reopen every assumption. The public had imagined Eden inside one danger, while the true danger had been the costume that made people stop looking closely. She was not taken because she was a flight attendant. She was vulnerable because she had almost been one, because she wanted the title badly enough to stand in the gap between rejection and proof, because Melora knew longing could be dressed in navy blue. Jasper No was cleared in a press conference that did not repair 8 months of whispers. He stood beside his sister in a work shirt and blinked at the cameras as if brightness were another accusation. He apologized to Greta for deleting messages, though she told him apology was not the thing she needed from him. What she needed was for people to remember how fast they had wanted him to be the answer. The hotel guest who had placed him near the stairwell wrote a letter to the prosecutor saying he had mistaken shame for memory. The airline issued a statement with careful sorrow and no unnecessary generosity. North Star Plains Air paid for Eden's funeral after Greta's lawyer threatened to introduce every ignored records request in civil court. A scholarship for low-income cabin crew applicants was announced, then renamed after Greta objected to branding her daughter as a training opportunity. The trial began in late winter, almost a year after Melora had first walked into the police office with the scarf. Courtroom displays showed crew records enlarged until they looked like maps of absence. Ari Tolland explained how an airline employee exists in layers: applicant tracking, conditional offer, background clearance, training roster, qualification record, payroll, uniform issue, crew scheduling, hotel authorization. Missing one layer could be error. Missing all of them was not. The defense tried to make the absence seem bureaucratic, another casualty of bankruptcy. Ari looked at the jury over her glasses and said, "Bankruptcy misplaces boxes. Not every record required to let a person open an aircraft door." She did not raise her voice. She did not need to. By then, the courtroom had seen the hand-corrected hotel list, the badge entries, the flight path contracts, the scarf residue, the bent wing pin, and the audio in which Eden herself said the sentence that made the case clear. Melora testified against her lawyer's advice. People who build their lives out of performance often believe one more performance can save them. She wore plain gray instead of navy. Without the wings, she looked smaller and less definite, but her voice regained some of its old, careful authority. She admitted the placement business, but called it mentorship that became disorganized. She admitted bringing Eden to the annex, but said Eden followed willingly and became hysterical when told no immediate job existed. She said there was a struggle near the mock cabin door, that Eden fell, that panic made the rest happen. She said she reported Eden missing because she could not undo what had happened, and because she feared no one would understand. Leo Markham listened from the back row and thought that even her confession was trying to choose its uniform. The prosecutor asked why Melora printed the hotel list after entering the airport, why she bought pharmacy items before Eden supposedly left, why she placed Jasper in the story before police mentioned him, why she carried a cleaned scarf as if it were a relic. Melora answered some questions with words and some with silence. The silences were more accurate. Greta did not attend every day. Some testimony had to be translated from procedure into pain, and she had lived enough of both. She came for Ari's records testimony. She came for the recovered audio. She came when the forensic anthropologist confirmed identification. She did not come when photographs of the training annex were shown. Instead, she sat in the courthouse hallway by a vending machine, holding Eden's childhood passport, the one stamped only once from a school choir trip to Toronto. She told Sabella Wynne that Eden had always liked thresholds, boarding doors, county lines, the moment when a bus left town and became possibility. She thought uniforms meant rules, Greta said. She did not know a person could wear rules like a mask. Sabella had no answer that did not insult the truth by trying to soften it. The jury convicted Melora on the major counts after less than 7 hours. The judge sentenced her to a term that would keep her in prison into old age. Fraud victims filled 2 rows behind Greta, not because their losses equaled Eden's, but because Eden had been the one who tried to make the paper speak. Kit Hollander brought the navy scarf she had kept in tissue and gave it to investigators for destruction, then changed her mind and asked that it be marked as evidence of the scam. Keir Bellis stood outside the courthouse and told reporters he no longer wanted to work in aviation. "I just want hiring to be honest enough that wanting a job is not a weakness," he said. It was the only sentence from that day Greta saved. Eden was buried in Cranley, under a sky full of low clouds that never turned to rain. Blue Harrier pilots did not perform a flyover. Greta refused when someone suggested it. Instead, 3 women who had cleaned hotel rooms at the Thistle Crown came in their work shoes and left small bottles of travel shampoo on the grave because they remembered finding the room after police were done with it. The bed smooth, the closet empty, the air still heavy with strangers deciding what mattered. Ari Tolland sent a copy of the corrected record, not because bureaucracy comforts the dead, but because accuracy was the closest thing the living could offer. It said Eden Rill, applicant and fraud victim, deceased. It did not call her a flight attendant. Greta stared at that line for a long time. Then she placed it in the same box as Eden's scratched trainee wings, the bird necklace, and the rejection letters. The truth had taken away the title Eden wanted. It had given back the person beneath it. Caraway changed in small, visible ways after the case, and in larger, hidden ones. The East Ramp Training Annex was emptied before demolition. Workers carried out the mock fuselage in sections, its windows dull with dust, its seats unbolted and stacked like discarded theater chairs. The platform trench was filled, photographed, sealed, and broken apart. The Thistle Crown stopped accepting hand-corrected crew lists. Airlines at the airport required digital verification for every crew room. Posters appeared in training schools warning applicants not to pay private placement fees. These were practical repairs, and practical repairs mattered. But Leo knew that procedure always arrives after the first person has already paid the price for its absence. He kept a photocopy of Eden's note in his case lecture folder, the line about hotel lists not being HR. When he showed it to younger officers, he did not tell them to distrust uniforms. He told them to verify the road between a uniform and a record. Months later, Greta returned once more to Caraway before sunrise. She did not tell reporters. She did not tell Blue Harrier. Sabella met her at the public entrance and walked with her through the nearly empty terminal. Morning travelers rolled bags past them, each person sealed inside private fatigue. At Gate C4, the windows reflected the 2 women against a parked aircraft whose cabin lights glowed softly in the dark. Beyond the glass, ramp workers moved with wands, tugs, fuel hoses, and ordinary purpose. Greta watched a real crew arrive, badges tapping their chests, coats open, coffee in hand, laughing at something too small to survive outside the moment. For a second, the sight hurt so cleanly, she had to close her hand around the strap of her purse. Then, she breathed through it. At the end of the concourse, where the missing poster had once lifted in the automatic door draft, the airport had installed a small plaque at Greta's insistence. It did not use the word vanished. It did not say beloved flight attendant, though a cheaper kind of mercy would have allowed the mistake to remain. It read, Eden Rill came here seeking work, dignity, and a life beyond the ground. Records revealed the lie that hid her. May every name be checked before every story is believed. Greta touched the engraved letters once. The metal was cold. Outside, the first flight of the morning began to push back. Not dramatic, not symbolic to anyone rushing toward it. Just a machine moving carefully from gate to taxiway, because many ordinary people had done their jobs in the proper order. Greta watched until the plane turned and its tail disappeared behind the jet bridge. Then she left the terminal with Sabella beside her, carrying no scarf, no wings, and no borrowed title, only the corrected weight of her daughter's name.